So, my name is Elliott Francis. I'm an IT project manager for the University of Utah, and I am an autist. Um, I've been working for the U for about 10 years. I started out as an under-the-desk IT rat, and my position over the last 10 years has gradually changed over to being where I am now, which is responsible for 2 of the mission-critical systems that they use for operations for the health science cores up at the University of Utah. My areas of responsibility include about, last count, it was 16 departments and about $50 million in assets. So those are my semi-credentials. I'm a programmer by trade, by training. My background is in multidisciplinary design. So basically that's a fancy way of saying that I convinced the University of Utah to give me a degree for taking whatever classes I felt like. It's really kind of cool. I'm going to be talking primarily about the skills and the processes that I utilize when I'm negotiating with my work environment to get accommodation or adjustments that help me function better when I'm doing my job. So. The honest truth is that up until about 2 years ago, I didn't really have a real strong need for much accommodation. But that's primarily because up until about 3 years ago, I was still working part-time because I was going to school. It took me 8 years to graduate from the University of Utah. So because I was really lucky to work with people who were tolerant of weirdness. When you work in education, especially at the PhD level, they tend to be a little more tolerant of, well, weirdness in general, because the people that they pay to, do all their research tend to be just a little bit out of touch with the rest of reality. I think it's part and parcel. Further along you get in your education, the more you forget how to talk to people who don't have your subspecialty. So, but starting about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I started working really full-time, and 2 years ago, I actually started having severe stress symptoms. And then just barely within this last year or so, it's manifested as basically I have full-time panic attacks. I have chest pains, I have occasionally have difficulty breathing. And all of this is related to how I interact with my environment and how my environment interacts with me. And that all hooks straight back in to how my autism shapes my view of the world. So the biggest thing that, if you're not going to take anything else away from what you need to know about working with companies and working with your superiors about gaining accommodation, is that you actually need to say something. I know that sounds really stupid, but it took me a really long time to get comfortable with the fact that either I was just going to have to quit my job, or they were going to have to make some accommodation. Now, I'm relatively lucky. My accommodation needs right now basically boil down to a set of noise-canceling headphones, which I could provide for myself. And as long as people knew I was wearing noise-canceling headphones, this wasn't a problem. But as you're working in the environment, it depends on the environment. Working as a programmer day in and day out tends to be relatively solitary to begin with. And on top of that, they expect you to a certain degree to be disconnected from what's going on in the office. They want you focused on writing whatever software it is you're writing and getting your stuff done. I also have the advantage of being a one-man dev shop for my particular department. So I'm the wizard on the mountain. When they want something, they come and tell me what that is, and then they go away and don't ask me how I do it. That being said, I have had a number of conversations with both my direct superior and as well as our department head. And they are all aware that I'm on the autism spectrum and that I was having difficulties. And they're all aware, in fact, they've encouraged me on a number of occasions to be a little more respecting of my own personal health, both mentally and physically, because of the, obviously it's a bit selfish on their part. They need me at this particular juncture to continue doing what I'm doing. But they needed to know that I was having an issue. They needed to know that I was on the autism spectrum, because if they don't know, they can't respond. The second thing that I want you to take away is that when you're working with business people, especially neurotypical business people, the thing that you have to bring to them when you bring them a problem is you have to bring them a potential solution. You can't just come to them and say, hey, this is the problem that I'm having. For example, fluorescent lights. Everybody hates fluorescent lights, right? Okay, almost everybody hates fluorescent lights. They're an easy hang point. If I just come to somebody and say, I can hear the fluorescent lights, it's disrupting my ability to work. I can't work effectively for you because I can hear the light over my desk. It's disrupting my concentration. If I come to them and I put that problem on their desk and that's all I say, they look at me and they say, okay, I don't hear the light. I don't know how to fix that. What do you want me to do about it? And they're basically they're going to sit there and they're going to look at you and they're going to say, you've given me a problem with no solution. My job schedule is already full and I really don't need to be solving your personal problems on top of everything else that I'm supposed to be doing. So instead, it's important to come to them and say, I'm hearing the lights above my desk. It's disrupting my ability to concentrate. What I'd like to do is if you think you can just get away with it, then say, yeah, I just want to remove this, distraction entirely. Or you can come, if they give you a little bit of pushback on that, you can also say, well, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to propose that for X period of time, we measure my productivity using whatever metrics you end up agreeing on. But I'd like to do it in 2 stages. The first stage that I'd like to do is I'd like to demonstrate what it's like to work without the light on. My solution to the problem is to turn the light off. It's either to turn the light off or to remove it. Then you can come do that for, it's called a month. Then we'll do another month with the light back on, and then we'll sit down and we'll do a data comparison. And we'll say, hey, was I more productive with the light off than it was when the light on? And most of the time, the productivity is going to improve because you're addressing a problem. You're making yourself more productive for them. And when you come to them with a solution to that problem rather than just the problem, usually they'll say, as long as it's not costing me any money, go right ahead. Do whatever you need to do to do that. And surprisingly, I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of organizations here over the last while. I've been working with the Columbus Center up in Salt Lake, and we've been working with the Utah Neurodiversity Workforce Project, which is funded by a grant out of the governor's office. And we go around and we talk to companies and talk to them about what it's like, what they need to know about hiring individuals on the autism spectrum, so that they can get it, so that they've got an understanding coming in the door of what it's going to be like to work for these individuals. Because I guarantee you, you've got a skill that somebody wants. You do something that's going to make their life easier, and they will pay you for it. And the beautiful thing is that often that skill that you've got is something that's a special interest for you. And I know we've heard this word special interest thrown around a lot in conjunction with autism. Everybody's got a special interest. But we have special interests, and we have a talent for pursuing them with almost a maniacal bent, which means that we become masters at that particular skill. And when you turn mastery towards solving somebody's problem, they tend to be really grateful, and in really good and as really good outcomes, they'll pay you lots of money to fix it. And they will quite often be much more tolerant of your quirks and the weirdness that you need to deal with if you're willing to come to them and say, hey, look, I don't want to make your job any harder. This is a problem I'm having. This is how I want to solve it. Those are the 2 things: letting them know and coming to them with a solution. that are going to be the most powerful tools in your toolbox when working with companies to figure out how to work in their environment in a way that isn't going to be destructive to you and to them. Those sound really simple. They do. And it's real easy for me to stand up here and talk about this because I've kind of done it already. It's really hard to figure out how to do that in practice because it depends on a set of skills that we don't know natively, which is the ability to read another person to determine how they're going to respond to that request. Sadly, the only advice that I can give you with regards to that is the same advice that I applied and that I benefited from. I had a really fantastic support network. I had autists who I could go and talk to. I work with a number of really fantastic people. One of them is a professor of entrepreneurship at the U. One of them is a patent attorney, and he and his wife, who are both on the spectrum, hold 10% of Google's patent load through their firm. It's a firm of 2 people. They hold 10% of Google's intellectual property patents under their umbrella. And I've got people, I've got a retired Vietnam helicopter pilot who I work with. And I've got a chemical engineer. All of these people are fantastically successful by any standard measure at what they do, and they all have autism. They grew up in a time where a diagnosis was your parents neglected you. We're sorry, we can't do anything about it. And these people have been able to give me feedback. I'll go to them and I'll say, here's the situation that I'm in at work. I don't really know how to handle this. And they'll give me feedback because they've seen it already. And one of the fantastic things about what they're doing here at AutCon and about a large number of groups around a large number of people in Salt Lake and around the world is that autism becomes more prevalent and people begin to recognize that that autism produces a mastery level specialty in certain areas and gives us abilities that are incredibly valuable. They can then turn around and say, okay, this is how you want to handle this. My favorite panic moment over the last 2 years was on Christmas this last year. I got a call every year. I've helped them build this report, but every year my department puts together a master report of performance for all of the departments that we're responsible for. It talks about revenue, it talks about income streams, it talks about services provided, and all of this fantastic. I've helped them put this report together 3 or 4 times now. But this year they decided to call me. And the question they asked was, what have you done this year? What I heard was, what have you done for us lately? We're trying to justify your job. If you don't answer this properly, you're getting fired. That's what I heard. I panicked. Completely blew me off. I was useless for about 3 days. I was able to call 3 people in my network. I was able to call my father. I was able to call another individual who works at the U, who had actually just recently been diagnosed with autism and had been dealing with a fundamentally similar issue. And I was able to call a friend of mine as well, who's on the autism spectrum. And they were helping me to triangulate and figure out how I was supposed to respond to this. And it turns out, for me at least hilariously, that the question they were asking wasn't, we're trying to justify your job. They were just asking, oh, we want to give a 1-sentence blurb or a 1-paragraph blurb at the very beginning that tells everybody what IT projects we've been working on for the last year. That was it. There was no mention of my job, my performance, or anything whatsoever. But I'd never encountered that situation before. And if I hadn't had someone that I could go to, or a vague understanding of how the, weirdness that happens when you're working at a federal academic level, I applied for another position at another company nearly immediately, because I was ready to throw ready to throw the last 10 years of my career right out the door because I misunderstood a question. And what ended up happening is that all I really needed to do is I needed to go and ask them, what did you really mean by this question? I didn't need to go to them and say, are you trying to justify my job? I needed to say, okay, hey, you asked me this question. I'm not sure I really understood it. Can you please tell me what exactly it is that you're trying to accomplish with this question? Because just like when you're working with neurotypicals in a social context, when you're working with neurotypicals in a professional context as well, they've got this whole baked-in assumption about what they think the world should actually be functioning like. They've got all this baggage and all this framework that comes with what they're thinking. And it's perfectly obvious to them that, oh yeah, we're just asking you about what you've done recently so that we can tell other people you've been doing a great job. Without going to them and asking them what they actually meant. And it's actually really surprising, because I don't know how many of you have read a whole lot about psychology, but one of the really key, when people say that, when people, especially psychologists, talk about being really good with people, good people skills, 90% of it is listening. People, when they talk to you, they want to talk to you. They're not actually expecting a whole lot back. So as long as you act like you're listening, you don't actually have to be listening. In fact, you don't even have to be understanding what they're talking about. As long as you act, you just kind of sit there with your head cocked to the side and occasionally look at them, they'll give you all the information you need. And when you ask that question of, oh, I didn't really understand, what they're hearing is, oh, I want to hear more about what you were doing. Now, I'm going to caveat all of this with a statement that this is primarily true in technical fields or knowledge-based fields. If you're working at Wendy's and you ask your shift manager after you've been working there for 6 months or a year, I don't remember how to use the fryer, might have a problem. But the good news is that there are, what was the number? Right. There are 50,000 unfilled jobs in higher specialty fields, in both in technical STEM, in the STEM fields here in Utah. And autists are exquisitely well equipped to function in those jobs, to perform those jobs. And the only thing that we need to do to let these companies know that we're out here and we're ready to go is to be able to come to them and say, I have a skill set. This is what I'm good at. I'm going to need a little bit of accommodation because, gosh darn it, I really hate the color pink, and your walls are beautiful, beautiful baby girl pink. Beautiful baby girl pink. And I can't stand that color. Can we please just maybe repaint a room or find a closet that I can work in so that I can help you solve the really weird and wicked problems that you've got, the interesting problems that you've got that I love to work on. If you can just find one corner that isn't painted baby pink. And very often, they will say yes. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stuff with regards to that process. There's salary negotiation, there's onboarding and stuff like that, and there are resources available for that. The organization that I found, that I helped found, Optimizing Autism, one of the things that we do is we take individuals who are on the autism spectrum who have been successful, and we go into companies and we offer our services and we say, okay, look, you want to hire autists, or you've got a candidate that's an autist, and you want to understand, you really want to translate. Very often when you're coming into these situations, one of the things that we've noticed is that the autist, both the autist and the neurotypical who are involved in that process, are having a really hard time communicating. They're butting heads and they just don't understand each other. They're asking weird questions, what seem like weird questions on both sides of that. And what we do is we come in and we provide translation services. And we also we do every 6 months now we do workshops where we get a bunch of autists together and we put them all in the same room, and we do basically what Nancy did. We have them get up and talk about what their experiences are, so that everybody's got an opportunity to say, okay, this is what I did, you can ask me questions about it. And that will teach you the skills, because people are willing to help. Those will teach you the skills that you need to be able to walk up and get the adaptations to your work environment, or to come to somebody and say, as you're coming in the door as part of the negotiation process, it's like, it's not part of your salary, it's not your health benefits, but it is a benefit. You can come in and you can say, oh, I work better with noise canceling headphones because I can't hear, Jimmy over there talking to Sue about last night's game at the water cooler. That way I can focus better. And a lot of people are, as long as your job isn't primarily customer service, and it's not in a call center, don't work in a call center. If you can possibly avoid it, don't work in a call center. They'll say, sure, it's not costing me any money for you to bring your headphones in. We'll need to train your manager that they need to come up to you and sort of say, hi, can you take your headphones off so that we can talk with you? Kind of stuff like that. I had to train my manager to do that. He's still confused as all get out, but he does it. And he doesn't really have a problem with it because he knows that when I've got my headphones on, I'm trying to focus and I'm trying to do better work for the organization. Conveying that minor adaptations to your work environment can help the company and help you to be more productive for the company. To the company, which very often they've got no context for this. They don't understand where you're coming from. They don't know what's going on. Being able to convey that information and being comfortable conveying that information, which is hard. It's really hard. The hilarious thing is that I didn't get really good at this. I've been presenting at the conferences that we've been having and talking to people about what it's like to be on the autism spectrum for 3 years before I was ready to advocate for myself in my own work environment. Because there's a confidence portion of that. It's very difficult to know that they're not just going to turn around and fire you on the spot, right? It's really scary. But taking that chance will often significantly benefit you, and it'll significantly benefit the company. And if you're coming into it from an interview standpoint, you can bring, if you want, you can bring it up with your initial interviewer, but what you're going to want to do is when you're talking with the department lead, because very often with the interview process, they'll have you talk to the HR drone who's doing your resume filtering, and then they'll have you talk to the department lead who's going to be over you. If you can talk to the department lead and say, hey, just wanted you to know, I have you can say you're on the autism spectrum or not. It's entirely up to you. But you can say, hey, I've got this one particular quirk. I'm really sensitive to sound. I like to use noise canceling headphones so that I can focus. Is that going to be a problem? They'll usually ask you a couple of questions like, well, are you going to wig out if we tap you on the shoulder? Definitely tell them if you are going to wig out if they tap you on the shoulder, just so you can work around them. But as long as you sit down and you specify the ground rules of the ground rules of the interaction, very often they're just going to say, okay, I can work with that. And you'll go forward from there. I make it sound easy. I know I do.
By law, aren't they supposed to be able to?
There's a panel. I think, I want to say it's third session by a very talented lawyer
Yeah,
who's
was that the Understanding My Rights under the ADA?
Oh, did they cancel that?
Yeah, we just found out during the keynote.
Oh, I think I had the privilege of hearing him speak at the Bear Lake Autism Conference. So
it's not just for.
let me boil it down. Let me boil down what his presentation was when I heard it. The HR people get really, really nervous when you mention disability, especially if you use the ADA during the interview process. And that's because they are violently allergic to lawsuits. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. These people are violently allergic to lawsuits. They want to know that you're not going to come back at some later point and sue their ass off for, $50 bajillion. That's what they want to know. So there's a burned hand kind of thing on there. They don't want to have any risk at that. Which is why I normally recommend that during the interview process, you say, I have a sensitivity, or I have over the course, you can couch it however you want. Normally what I'll say, over the course of my work experience, I have determined that I work better in quieter environments, which is why I use noise canceling headphones. And if you bring it up like that and say, look, I've got a quirk, I've already got a solution, it doesn't need action on your part, then they're okay. The technical definition under the ADA is that accommodations must be provided if the disability does not disqualify the individual from performing the core job activity. That generally means nobody actually knows what's going on, and if it goes to trial, then you're going to spend 6 months arguing it. Nobody actually knows what the ADA means right now. That's the sad truth of the situation, and that's what he said. You can choose to disclose if you'd like after you've been hired, as long as the disclosure of your capability does not fundamentally prevent you from performing the work that you have been contracted to do. They can't, under the law, fire you. They're required to provide reasonable accommodation. And the simple truth is that for individuals on the autism spectrum, if they're applying for the job, they probably think that they're, as long as it's not mom forcing you out to say, look, you need to go get a job. You're going to apply here, here, and here. I filled out the applications for you. That's what you're going to do. As long as the autist is going out and pursuing the position, then I would bet that 95% of the time they're capable of performing the work. They're probably also capable of performing it really well. So as long as you come in and you don't wield the ADA like a bat and say, look, I am going to say that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have to remove the light from over my desk. That just sounds absurd. Absolutely absurd. And it puts them under an emotional threat. If your boss hears that you're going to pull the ADA on him, his bosses are going to be pissed off because it's like, you just exposed us to a lawsuit. What are you doing? So there's the defensive reaction. And unfortunately, the Americans with Disabilities Act is really, really badly tuned right now for dealing with neurodiversity issues. It's for people who got their leg blown off, their hand cut off, physical disabilities. They can't walk, they can't see, they can't hear, that kind of stuff. Which is why my recommendation is avoid the ADA if you possibly can. Now, if you've been working at a place for 9 months, they pull in a new manager, and the manager says, "Why is that light out? Put the light back," and then is completely unwilling to work with you after you've already demonstrated that you're capable of working better with the light out, then if you really need to, you can hire a lawyer and go for the ADA thing. Or you can sometimes threaten them with even the threat of an ADA thing will usually be enough to have somebody higher up come down and step on that person. But avoid it if you can, because using legal means when you're interacting with business entities is kind of like threatening somebody with a gun. You may get what you want, but they're not going to be happy about it on the other end. That's kind of all I've got. We're down to about 10 minutes, so I usually like to leave some time afterwards because somebody's always got questions. So, as you amply demonstrated, thank you.
I struggle to figure out. I've had issues, getting and keeping jobs and stuff. So I go, okay, there's got to be accommodations that could maybe help me out. And one of them that keeps coming to mind is if I can have somebody to keep in sync with all the time, so that to make sure that I know what the priorities are. Because one of the things that's gone wrong is O'Brien's working on the wrong thing. Why is Brian working on the wrong thing again? And so I'm kind of going under that.
Ideally, that individual is going to be your immediate superior, your immediate supervising manager. That is a little bit of a negotiation process.
I'm actually having, I'm kind of doing that right now, but I didn't really settle on it until I already found out who they were going to make the QA lead and that it wasn't going to be me. Because I always was afraid, okay, if I'm demonstrating that I don't already know the priorities, I'm not going to get promoted. They're going to be like, he's the one that doesn't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think that well, I don't care if I'm rank and file, QA lead, dev manager, whatever, I still need to know what the priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out how to reconcile that need, but not have it sabotage me.
The biggest problem that you're going to run into is that, especially when you're dealing with leadership positions, is that neurotypicals very often conflate their self-worth with their relative position of power. And it's important to note that that's a relative position of power, not their actual power. Individuals on the autism spectrum, I've noticed, we are deeply disinterested in who's actually in charge, as long as the person who's in charge is working towards the goal. Whatever the goal is, as long as they're working towards the goal, as long as they are competent in what they are doing, we don't actually care who's in charge. And if you've ever had the distinct pleasure to interact with a group of autists over the number of 5, you will note that, and you may recall, if you've had that opportunity, that autists, we promote on basis of immediate competency. It's a very flat structure. If I'm more competent in the topic at hand, then I lead. If I'm not, I relinquish and let somebody who is competent lead. That's not how neurotypicals work. You may have heard at some point that you get promoted to your level of incompetence. You keep going up until you hit something that you can't do. Relatively accurate, but they come at it differently. And when neurotypical individuals are asked to relinquish power, they take it very badly, because then they think that somebody's looking at them and saying, "Oh, you can't do that. Go away. You're not good enough for this." So in dealing with situations where you've got shifting priorities, it's really important, or it's been my experience, that it's been really important to have that one point of contact. And it sounds like you're already developing that, or
Yeah,
trying
well,
to.
and the guy, it's a unique situation. The guy that's gonna be the QA lead is the one that I'm using for that, and it's all, now I know it's not gonna change who gets promoted, because I already know they're putting him in that position that they actually had planned to for 6 months, but yeah, so now, and I have a good relationship with him, so I'm gonna use him.
So now you have a fixed point of reference to tell you when the priorities have changed.
It's not the first time I've had this problem, and oftentimes it seems to me like just in coming out saying, I need to make sure I know what the priorities are so that I don't go off doing the wrong thing, so that I'm giving you what you need, and and we're both happy and stuff. But usually if I ever come out with anything like that, it just guarantees that I get shifted down further on the totem pole, because, oh, he has a problem knowing what the priorities are. He's not going to go out there.
And unfortunately, the only answer to that question is that's actually a corporate culture problem and has nothing to do with you. I wish I had a different answer for that. So there's only two ways you can react to that. You can either accept that that's just the way that it's going to be and try and deal with it, or you can go and find another location that's going to work better. Well, actually, there's three things you can do. If you're feeling really superhero-y, you can say, hey, wait a minute. I'm trying to do this so that the entire organization can function better, because when everybody knows what's going on and we're not having to sit down and sort through 15 different email chains that I only came in on in the last 2, everybody knows what's going on. And this is, actually, hilariously, this is the foundation. This is the foundational principle of good product, or of good project management. It's making sure that everybody's on the same page. So, again, primarily a corporate culture thing. I wish I had a different answer for you, but that's simply the truth of the way it is. On the bright side, there are a large number of organizations that are starting to get the picture, especially when working with individuals on the autism spectrum, when they're consciously trying to work with individuals on the autism spectrum, that you need to have fixed points of reference that are doing what needs to be done. Did I answer your question, or did I wander off into the weeds?
I think you answered it as well as I can be. I didn't ask a very direct question either.
Anybody else?
I just had a thought on what you were talking about, and I'm not an expert, but just thinking about myself at work and how I go to my supervisor. I think a lot of times the way your supervisor maybe takes what you're saying is depending on the wording. I try to word things to where it sounds like, hey supervisor, I'm trying to please you, I'm trying to make you happy. So I don't know what wording works for your supervisor, but something where you're saying,
Excellent point.
So I've got these different projects, which would you like me to do first? Or you get a new project coming in, okay, so there's this new thing to work on, would you like me to put that ahead? Or do you want me to continue working on what I've been doing? And just make it into the language of, hey supervisor, I'm here to do what you want. I'm trying to please you. I don't know. I don't know if that's different than what you've been doing. But
And
that's
unless you've had a lot of experience dealing with neurotypicals and understanding what they perceive as an emotional threat to themselves, that can be really difficult. But as long as you can try and avoid, and there are a large number of people that you can talk to, there are classes that you can take on how to deal with conflict resolution that are really helpful, and I'm out of time, that are really helpful for understanding how to phrase things properly so that they are non-confrontational for neurotypical individuals. Because they don't understand, unless you tell them or they've been taught, they don't understand that we are not emotionally invested in what we're asking. We just want the answer. We're not, our sense of self isn't bound up in how they answer the question. We just want to know the answer to the question.
I think you're overthinking it, Elliott. Sorry.
Oh, that hurts.
You know I don't mean that. I'm making fun of you.
Trust me, I know. Anybody else? Okay, Well, thank you for showing up. This is, I hope you got something from it. My policy is that if I get up and I talk and at least one person thinks I said something interesting, my job has been well done. So, thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the convention and find interesting people to hoover information off of.